Item number 3 is a public hearing to determine property identified by Resolution 2019-11. This is a property located at 117 and 121 East Oklahoma.
I tried to put together a little PowerPoint on this. As the mayor indicated, the public hearing deals with the property at 121 East Oklahoma and 117. We did provide notice to the property owner that we were having a hearing that would consider adopting a resolution condemning the property as unsafe and a dilapidated structure and setting a timeline to address it. Of course, sometimes it comes down to a question of historic preservation versus demolition, or historic value versus economic value. Sometimes those things work out, sometimes they don't. There's too big a difference. The Burlines have acquired another building at 211 East Oklahoma Avenue and are in the process of renovating it. To date, they've expressed no intentions to refurbish the two existing buildings at 117 and 120 East Oklahoma. They have been reminded, as the property owners, they are responsible for securing, cleanup, and potentially the future demolition of the two buildings if they're not rehabilitated. First concern was, of course, securing the perimeter. And there was a fence put up around the property. That was a rental agreement for 6 months. And through June 17th, I believe, the bill was a little over $2,400. We have, of course, sent that invoice to the property owner. And however we deal with this property tonight until it's finally resolved, that will be a reoccurring cost. Is maintaining a fence around the property to secure the perimeter so no one gets injured or hurt. Potential outcomes tonight, of course, number one, restoration, rehabilitation. I think that's probably the preferred option of everybody in the community, that happens and the two buildings be restored, whether that be by the current owners or through some acquisition by a private investor or a community group. If there is a group comes forward and proposes restoration, I think the type of things that will be important to the city council will be one that the entity needs to submit a plan of action with a timeline for completion. And in there, the first step would be immediately to stabilize the building and remove any debris that's not going to be used in the renovation process. And then, of course, restoration of both structures. And then I think the city council would be interested in the entity being able to document the source of revenue that they're going to have to do that project. So those are the kind of questions, if there's going to be a proposal on renovation. What's the plan? How long it's going to take? Where the resources going to come from? How long do you wait? What's reasonable time frame to allow for renovation? Then if that doesn't occur, the other potential outcome is demolition, removal of debris, and fill the basements before the building can be demolished. It's in the historic district, and so we would have to have consent from the Historic Preservation Commission for the demolition. Of course, it's the property owner's responsibility to clean up and demolish it if it's not renovated. Again, how long does the city wait? Option B is for the city to use the same condemnation process for unsafe and dilapidated structures we use for other private residents in the community, and that's under a state statute. And if the city gets to the point they have to tear it down and hire a contractor, an invoice is sent to the property owner. If it's not paid, then it goes on the, it's recorded at the county and becomes similar to property taxes. And the third option under demolition is to do something similar to what we did with Banner School property, where the city does the cleanup and demolition. The city obtains property ownership, and the city would be interested in some cost participation from the owner if that option is pursued. The resolution, I would point out, that is up for consideration after this public hearing. Traditionally, we give homeowners 30 days to complete their action after the resolution's adopted. Of course, this timeframe stated in the resolution can be modified or extended by the city council. So clearly, the timeframe for a project like this may be different than the 30 days that you would give for a residential structure. And so that before adoption of the resolution, the city council might want to give consideration to that and adjust that time frame in the resolution before it's adopted. And then I'd point out in section 4 of the resolution, when it's adopted, we record it at the county so that puts a notice to everybody and a lien on the property. So if we do have to demolish it and use city funds, our lien on the property would be ahead of other liens filed later. And that puts any potential buyers, investors on notice that there's pending action on the property. If the resolution is adopted, the full range of options, including restoration, rehabilitation, are still available. Historically, when we've condemned residential structures, when the homeowners come before the city council that they want to renovate or rehabilitate their homes rather than tear them down, and they come forward with a plan, the city council has worked for them, with them, and resolution might say 30 days, but the council can extend that as long as there's progress showing. That same scenario could play out here if there's a group that plans proposed renovation. Even if the resolution condemning the structure is adopted, the city council can work with that group and agree to reasonable timeframes before the city takes any action on demolition for that group to implement their plan for restoration. And then once it's restored, then we would take it off the condemnation list. Again, if it's adopted, potential buyers and investors are put on notice that there's a pending action on the property. And it also, if the resolution is adopted, it gives the city council more leverage to start setting target dates for completion of any agreed to plan of action. And the city council can always extend the deadline if they feel substantial progress is being made. This was the original concept for the proposed Guthrie outdoor entertainment venue that has been discussed. And in that one, we were using Wentz and looking at purchasing the Powell building. If for some reason this building is not, the two Berline buildings are not restored, and we're looking for some readaptive use of the property, if restoration is not feasible, this revised concept, we would not have to purchase the Powell property, so that money could be used for part of the cost of the demolition. We would slide the project to the west. We would still have Wentz, and it would be a little bit narrower project, but we could continue to look at consideration of an outdoor entertainment venue on Wentz between Oklahoma and Harrison. Some options there would be to plant a permanent Christmas tree if this was what ended up being done with the property for Territorial Christmas, where you actually have a Christmas tree rather than a regular tree to put lights on. And we could possibly incorporate this project in with moving forward with tearing out the bridge on Harrison and redoing that street in front of the stadium. With that, I would suggest we open the public hearing and allow people to have a chance to input for the city council to have discussion.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that information. We have some individuals that have identified that they would like to speak to this issue. Susan Guthrie, would you like to go ahead and lead the way? If you would, just come to the microphone, identify yourself and your address, and we are limiting to
Back on, Leroy, because I certainly can't see in the dark.
5 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'm Susan Guthrie Dunham, and I don't live in Guthrie any longer, but Guthrie is near and dear to my heart, and will always be. I would like to first read a letter. The National Trust for Historic Preservation has been contacted about this dilemma. And it says, "Dear members of the Guthrie City Council, I write today on behalf of the National Trust for Historic Preservation regarding the proposal before you to raise two significant historic structures in downtown Guthrie's National Historic Landmark District, which have been damaged by fire. Demolition is forever, and the National Trust would strongly encourage that the city exhaust all other options before taking that irreversible step. The materials, craftsmanship, and authenticity embodied in older buildings cannot be replaced. Additionally, the loss of these buildings would erode the integrity of what is a remarkably intact downtown historic district. The National Trust supports efforts to redevelop these buildings and so that they can again contribute to Guthrie's economy and to telling parts of its rich history." If you Google, there's two levels. You have a National Register District, which is mostly the old original township. And then you have a National Historic Landmark District, which is the downtown, which these two buildings are in the Landmark District. If you Google it, a National Historic Landmark are historic places that hold national significance. The Secretary of the Interior designates these places as exceptional because of their abilities to illustrate U.S. heritage. Today, we almost have 2,600 NHLs in the United States. Now, 2,600. That's not a whole lot of NHLs when you consider Boston, Philadelphia, D.C. I mean, of course, we know that the East Coast has 100 more years of history to deal with than we do, but to be a part of an NHL designation is significant. I would ask, in listening, I've spent a good bit of my life working on financings and developing partnerships with developers for historic preservation. And the one thing that kind of caught my attention is that this ordinance puts any developer on notice that the project is not necessarily supported by the city of Guthrie. I talked with a staff person. The National Trust has a for-profit subsidiary that we provide, well, I'm off board now as of October, but they provide new markets tax credits and historic tax credits for significant projects. I talked to one of the staff members last week. We have a separate set-aside under the new markets tax credit. This group considers a $2 million project extremely small, extremely small. But they set aside some bit of their tax credits, new markets tax credits, to focus on Main Street projects. So $2 million around is probably the minimum that they would do. You know what he asked me? How does the city feel about it? And I said, preservation hasn't been a top priority, as I've seen it, through the years of the city of Guthrie. And he said, we would not want to come into a community that we didn't have full, total support from the city government. If this resolution is passed, you're not stopping the potential for restoring and rehabbing these buildings, but you are definitely putting a speed bump in the way by declaring that the city of Guthrie does not have faith in the restoration proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guthrie.
I have one
Question, Ms. Guthrie?
On the new market tax credits, is there a special provision for historic districts? Because that's not in a census tract eligible for new market tax credits.
It is in the census eligible. It divides right there at Oklahoma. And I had a staff person for new markets.
Can you get right on the microphone? Thank you.
I had the staff person for new markets to clarify that it is in the new markets district. Barely, but
Okay.
it is.
Okay.
And of course, it qualifies for historic tax credits, both federal and state.
Okay,
Can I ask a question?
sure.
You said we'd be a speed bump for the restoration project proposed. What restoration project proposed are you talking about?
Well, there are a group of people currently that are trying to organize the redevelopment. And no, they don't have someone to sign personally on the bottom line, the note. But when you're developing a raw piece of ground, that is one way to look at a redevelopment. You hire an architect, engineers, concepts, 30, 60, 90 days maybe to get the plans and take the bids. But with the restoration project, the state and federal government has recognized that it is expensive. It is beyond typically what the market value is, return on investment. And so the state and federal government has determined we need to subsidize those historic preservation projects. And that is, state and federal laws that have been maintained to encourage projects like this that are not, they're not impossible, but they are extremely difficult. And the reason I say that it's a speed bump is because you are putting out there notice to any potential developer, any potential financer, that at any moment, the city of Guthrie could go, time's up. And it also sends a message that the city of Guthrie does not support historic preservation in a landmark historic district. It needs time, gentlemen. It just needs time. And I understand if I were sitting there, I'm sure that you get calls daily, but we have identified a funding source that will clean up and stabilize in the interim the property. There is a funding source in place, as I understand it.
And that is the National Trust that you're talking about, or is this a different funding source?
This is an individual has
Okay.
stepped forward, willing to cover the cost to stabilize, which, as preservationists, we don't want to see it, blown over either. We would like to see it stabilized and cleaned up. There's no doubt that it's an eyesore, but it's been less than 120 days. And these kinds of actions don't happen overnight. If preservation were easy, everybody would be doing it. It's not.
Can you share the scope of your word cleanup?
The cleanup would be to shore up the exterior walls. There have been multiple bids suggested or cost estimates put forward. You could put in braces every 12 inches, or you could put in braces every 5 feet or 10 feet, whatever. Ask a different structural engineer as to what is required. But it would be the minimum required to stabilize the facade, the exterior walls that are still there and still intact and contributing to the district. The debris that fell down in and of itself is a problem. But in order to get someone in there to clean out the debris, you've got to stabilize the walls first. So,
This person willing to pay for that Have they even spoke to the property owner?
Yes, they are.
So they're in
conversation.
agreement with the property, or the property owner's in agreement to let them do it?
Well, I can't speak for Byron and Betty, but I will say that I met with them, and Byron and Betty are financially and emotionally devastated by what happened. You know, if you had a 401K and you were Byron Berline, it would be in your instruments and your sheet music and your artifacts. They're all gone. No offense, Byron, I'm in my 70s almost, but, you know, if you're 75 or 74 years old, you don't want to, you don't want to take on an easy redevelopment project, you know, build a new house even. And this project is not easy. Most historic preservation projects are not easy. This one is extremely difficult, but it has been done in the past, and it can be done here with support.
Thank you very much for those comments,
Thank you.
Ms. Guthrie. Abigail Ropp?
Hello, do I need to state my address?
Yes.
Okay. Abigail Ropp, I live at 910 East Cleveland Avenue, and here in Guthrie, we've been here since October of 2016. My comments are, I would want to make sure, first of all, the fact that we have to have a meeting like this is devastating, because if anyone in this room could go back in time and make this not happen, every one of us would do that. I think that there's not a single soul in this room that wants to see Guthrie fail at all. And so my biggest point that I would like to make is that if there have been precedents set in the past that, yes, we do have ordinances, but maybe they were not followed because of whatever the case may be, I'd like to make sure that the timelines that are considered are that would be very feasible and be able to be accomplished. Obviously, 30 days is not going to work. And to see a project go through like this after owning the depot for over a year, you're at the mercy of equipment not coming in on time. You're at the mercy of rain and all kinds of weather, so that when the city council considers dates, I would ask that if this was your building and you had the intention of restoring it, that you would definitely keep that in consideration to know that the timeline given is completely doable, if not able to be appealed as information comes in on the project. That when it's being restored, as long as the group in charge of restoring it communicates, lets you know how things are going, you know, gives you status report updates, so that then you can talk to the individuals in Guthrie, who I know are blowing up your phones, and asking you when this is going to get cleaned up, that you have solid answers that you can actually give them. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our downtown district is preserved and that we don't have a big eyesore for people to look at. So my comments would just be, please take a look at maybe prior projects that have been restored and the timelines that it's taken, and maybe use that as a guide, as long as the groups that are involved in rehabilitation provide you ample information.
Questions? As you talk to people and with your own personal experience, what would you consider a reasonable timeframe?
Are you talking about shoring up the building, or are you talking about full restoration?
Restoration?
Full restoration? We have a building that we personally have been working on for a year. I don't know how many people would consider it fully restored. We know that we have a second phase. As far as full restoration goes, really, you're looking at a year to 2 years, depending on the scope of the project. If you're talking about something elaborate, obviously that timeline would take longer. My main concern now is getting it publicly safe, shored up, and that the debris is cleaned out, so that when we do go and have people come in, because there are property owners who are coming in looking at the buildings, interested in purchasing it, they're able to see past the rubble. If James Long took somebody into a house that was full of debris, it'd be difficult to look past that mess and see the value. So we'd like to at least know that we have the time to shore it up and get it cleaned out so that we don't have to worry about safety at this point.
Okay, all right.
I have a question. Would it be reasonable to have a series of steps in the timeline? One would be a timeline for stabilization of the structure, and then a follow-up later timeline to remove the debris, and then a timeline to document that the funding had been secured, and then one much further out for the actual restoration, so it could be done in steps.
I think that when you take a project on like this, I look at it as a city has kind of a banking relationship with it, that they're going to want to see that an individual who's coming to purchase a building has tax papers, has all the proof that says, hey, I'm not going to go into bankruptcy. I have all of my I's dotted and T's crossed with my W-2s that you need to see. So I think that at a certain extent, yes, you guys should be able to ask for timelines, but at the same time, I think that there needs to be understanding that if a timeline is getting close and there's massive rain and concrete can't be poured, that we can then go and submit a extension request to get work done that's clearly going to be happening. As long as there's forward movement and there's communication, I feel like a timeline should be able to be appealed to be extended.
And we have done that with residential structures we've condemned. They've been given extensions as long as they have documented and provided steps that they are making progress.
I can't speak for anyone else here, but for me, if you came to me and said, Abby, I need to see these things, I don't think that that's a ridiculous request at all. I think that's completely fair, as long as we can just submit what we need to submit and have those timelines be believable.
I don't think anybody here,
Close to the mic.
I thought it was. I said, I don't think anybody here would be detrimental to any progress being made, but this hearing is happening. We've seen 0 proposals, 0 anything from anybody. I mean, I keep hearing we stabilize, we this, we that, but who is we and where are they? And, that's we can't go, we're gonna, but there's nobody here saying we're doing it. So that's kind of why we have to do this meeting, because there is no proposal. There's nobody doing anything.
Well, to let you know some of the back work that's happened, we've had different companies come in and submit bids that tell us exactly the dollar amount that it's going to cost to shore up the buildings and also clean them out. And the dollar figure is way less than anyone could possibly anticipate. And I want to make sure that the individual who is going to be able to, who is offered to pay for that, has the flexibility in choosing the bid that they want to go with. But at the same time, it's a company, if I am correct in my information, that is very well known in Guthrie that would be doing the shoring up. They have Guthrie ties. They have absolutely the heart that says they don't want to see a crummy job happen. They're not just a contractor that's going to try to flip it quick and go. And so as far as a proposal, it has come to our attention within the last 48 hours that we have solidified a person to donate the money to fix it. So as far as a plan goes, we can definitely put one together. Should the city council allow that to happen, I'd be interested in that timeline for the plan to be constructed, submitted, and discussed, and that way we can give you numbers, dates, all of that, and be honest and transparent and show you what the plan is so that you guys are all aware of it, and you can also, again, let people know what's going on.
I don't think any of us want to kick progress, so to speak. It's just you have to start somewhere, and so far nothing's happened.
Well, not only has nothing happened, but the city is the one currently paying for the fencing. And so that's really the responsibility of the property owner, and the property owner has not shown any interest that wants to restore the buildings or put any money toward that. And so as I do not want to see those facades lost, I really don't, but I also believe that the property owner and whomever organization that he's getting with needs to get those invoices paid so that the city is out of it. The city has no business being part of it. It is private property currently. It should remain private property done with private money.
Ms. Rupp, is the group that you're speaking about the same as what Ms. Guthrie spoke about earlier? Is it one and the same, or are there two separate groups that are
No,
at
it's
work
one and
here?
the same.
One and the same? Okay, thank you.
One and the same.
Any other questions from the council? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Carol Herzl. Please state your name and address, and I'll remind you, you have 5 minutes.
Really?
Really, Carol?
Can we check with the city attorney if we want to hear information? Do we want to hear everything we
Just
want to know?
start.
No?
Go ahead.
Okay, well, on record. Can't read my notes. Okay. Carol Herzl, 3119 Cedar Ridge Court. My husband Jeff couldn't be here, but every week since the fire, we have been gathering information. We have talked to many people for proposals for the Burline building. Jeff is in Lions Club with Byron, and they have stayed in touch every week. We have different proposals from a preservation architect. At first, it was a $2.5 million to restore 2 buildings, but we quickly realized that is not feasible. There is a music venue in Oklahoma City, which in a historic building. It has very tall ceilings, 1 level. So instead of Byron's building that had 3 different levels, lots of expense, this would be 1 tall ceiling, brick walls that are already there, and a concrete floor. This venue in Oklahoma City has a big stage, it has hinges, and they put their tables and chairs underneath underneath the stage. So you could have a dance hall, or if you need to bring the tables and chairs out, you can do that also. Now, this is just an idea, but we've talked to bankers that are familiar with this venue in Oklahoma City, and they say that venue is doing great. This banker used to live in Guthrie and said, I think it's ideal for a music venue in Guthrie because we have theater, we have music. Why not Guthrie be theater and music? And my husband talked to Logan County Economic Development last week, and they said, absolutely, we give loans, and we have better loan rates than the banks, and they have extended terms. So we have financing, we have architects, we have proposals for developers, and every single week we've done that. We've been in contact with the National Trust, with Susan, who's been in contact with the National Trust, and so I don't know, is there anything that we haven't done? And do you want to talk about the email I sent you?
I shared that with the city council.
So all the city council keeps saying they don't know anything. That's what I'm confused. I sent information about our past histories. Do you want to go over that?
I think the email you sent is similar to what's being said tonight, but again, the details of who's financing, timelines, that kind of stuff was not in that email.
It was SOD Foundation and Logan County Historical Society. Both have a record of the Rock Island Depot. SOD Foundation did that. And the way we did that, we asked people to put money up. Sonic put money up. It used to be a spray-painted building, spray-painted silver. It had a bad roof. We took the silver off, we replaced the roof, and then at some point, somebody bought it. But we can't predict a timeline when you do some improvements and people say, oh, I get it, I want to do further, because we have a group that is willing to stabilize it and remove the debris. You have to brace it first, and I believe, did you talk to the contractor this morning, today?
I've not had any communications from anybody today.
Diversified?
They didn't indicate that.
Brad Latham told me he talked to you. That's why I'm confused
just-
why there's not information out there. If we want to clarify?
The only thing he asked me is if he could attend the meeting tonight, since he was a resident from another community, is all that he communicated. And I said, yes, you could. So that's the extent of our phone call conversation today.
Okay, well, is it clear now we have money to do the bracing and the debris cleanup?
We've heard that there is an individual who is willing to step forward to do that.
And that's us. We're
That's what we've
spearheading
heard.
that. Jeff and Carol Herzl are spearheading it, and we're ready to go.
For the stabilization
And the cleanup.
and cleanup. Correct.
And the owner is willing to let you do that? Do you have an agreement with the owners?
Okay?
I see them sitting there. I asked you the question.
The record reflect that Byron Berline said yes, the answer to that question. Is that correct, Byron? Okay. All right. Carol, anything else?
Well, does anybody else say that, I mean, you feel like you're up to date now with what we've been doing for many, many conversations and much work? Does anybody think we haven't done something that we should be doing?
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Herzl. Since it is a public hearing, I'll ask if there's anybody else that would like to make any comment, to just identify yourself and follow the same process that has been followed by the three previous speakers. Byron, you want to come forward, please? Identify yourself, address.
Byron Berline, 1010 East Noble, Guthrie, Oklahoma. Well, you know how I feel. I want this building to stay as it is, be resurrected if at all possible. Betty and I can't afford to do it. And we want to keep going. That's why we bought another building straight east, of that. But I would hate to see it demolished, but if that's what it has to be, but that's what it would be. But I really appreciate these folks' concern and want to preserve that building and to be able to put the money into it. And as far as the timeline, I hope you will work with us on that, as far as getting things rolling. We don't want to wait forever, for sure. We know that. But a decent timeline would be great if you could see to do that for us. But I really, and whatever they do with the building, and like you mentioned, an entertainment type building, I think it would be wonderful, because that's my business is entertainment. So I think it would be great. But I just appreciate all the interest in the building and wanting to preserve it, and since it is a historical building.
Any questions? So you have had dialogue then with this working group?
Yes.
Periodically?
Yeah, Jeff Herzl's kept me, different people are interested in stuff. He didn't give me any names as far as that goes. Well, he did give me a name, but, but I know that's what they're working on, trying to shore up the facade and make sure that's structurally sound before they go and do the debris. So I think once that's done, I think you'd all be happy if that happened. I know I am.
How long will it take for some of this shoring up would start?
Well, I don't know. I'm not the one that you'll have.
I'm asking you because you're the owner. I think they're going to have to give you permission, or you're going to have to give them permission. to do it.
Yes.
So you don't know?
We don't know exactly. I don't know exactly the date right now.
Have you received the invoices from the city in regards to the current temporary
Yes, I
fencing?
have.
Okay. Are there any intentions to get that paid?
Well, we'll see what happens. I'm not going to say right. Yeah, I'm sure there is. Eventually.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Berline. The city is not an adversary in this. The city wants things to be moving forward. And we want our historic area to continue to be an historic part of our community. It's a part of our foundation. It's a part of the bones of who we are. But having said that, the first picture that was up there on the burned out two buildings, we also have a responsibility to the community, a responsibility to safety, a responsibility to move forward. So please don't interpret this resolution as one of being an adversarial, but we do have to make steps forward. And And I think some of the dialogue that's happened in the last half an hour kind of reflects some potentially good steps. Any other community comments? Ms. Guthrie, you can certainly come and have up there. Maybe you can shed a little bit more specifics than what you, that have come up since you made your first presentation. Thank you. And you don't have to identify yourself and your address this time.
Isn't it great to be named Guthrie? You know, what I said was the speed bump. If you would give this resolution 30 days of simmer time before you make public the fact that the city is on the path to forcing demolition or forcing something to happen, if you would give it 30 days to simmer, I think that you can get a firm bid and a firm commitment for the stabilization and then debris removal. But stabilization has to happen first. Don't want anybody being hit by falling bricks.
Absolutely.
So that's all I'm asking is that, you know, simmer it for 30 days and force the budget to come back.
Any other questions by council?
Not a question. I just think that I would love to see those restored. I don't see a problem giving 30 days, but I also would expect in that 30 days that that current outstanding invoice for fencing be paid for by private dollars and the city no longer floating that. That's great. I think it's unfair to put that on the piggyback of the
That was,
city.
that was a statement by Ms. Herzl, I believe, saying that she would pay the fencing.
It's the principle, Carol. It really is.
Okay, if there's no other public comment, then we will move on to the item number 4, which is the actual discussion and proposed action to approve Resolution 2019-19, which is declaring these two properties, 117, 121 East Oklahoma, and taking action as identified in the resolution that was before the council. Any additional comments?
No, sir.
That was Resolution 2019-11.
11,
Yeah.
correct? No other comments? I'll entertain a motion
Well-
to approve that resolution.
I'd actually like to just,
Can we table it?
I'd like to table it and give them the 30 days they're asking for, because that's giving us, that's the motion we're looking for, is that someone's committed to do something, and if they can do it within 30 days, then maybe we'll know where we're at. And that's what they're asking, that's what we were wanting to do, is to see what's going on, and I think we've achieved our goal by giving them 30 days to do that.
So is
Other
there a
comments?
motion?
Other comments?
No, sir.
Okay, there hasn't been a motion.
A motion to table for 30 days.
Now there is.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to table Resolution 2019-11 for 30 days for additional information and progress. Any other discussion? Submit your votes.
All votes are in.
See the votes. Ladies and gentlemen, you have 30 days. Remove that speed bump.